Hello, my name is Adam Nayman, and this is another Ringers Movie Channel video essay. In putting together a list of my favorite performances from the past year, my main criteria mostly had to do with the element of surprise. That doesn't mean that the actors on this list are necessarily obscure. There's obviously some big movie stars here, and plenty of recognizable faces, even for casual moviegoers, even if they're not always in the kinds of roles that you might expect. What I mean is that I wanted to see performances that did an end run around expectations, or else leaned into those expectations and kind of blasted a hole through the other side. In the same way it's possible for good actors to elevate poorly written roles, it's possible sometimes that strong parts can mask their interpreters' deficiencies, or can let actors skate by doing what would seem to be the minimum. The majority of the performances on this list are attached to characters who are defined in some way by mystery or self-division, whether they're serial killers or true crime aficionados, CEOs or warlords, effortless charmers or loners living on a razor's edge of alienation. There's a fair amount of crossover this year between the best performances and the best films. That can be a little bit predictable, but I also wanted to give love to actors who rose above the flaws of the movies around them by doing the most. And sometimes it made it seem like those flaws didn't even matter. Not sure you're going to agree with everybody on this list, but I hope that you find the choices and the reasoning interesting as always, and hope that you enjoy. It's rare to watch a movie where it feels like a character is capable of doing anything. In most thrillers, even the most psychologically fragile or fractured protagonists usually obey the laws of genre around them. And then when they don't obey those laws, it can feel like a cheat. The marvel of French-Canadian actress Juliette Gariepi's performance in Red Rooms is that her character, a part-time model, A+ online poker player, and possible sociopath named Kellyanne, exists seemingly not just as a mystery to others, but also to herself. I thought Pascal Plant's film was, for me, not just the best, but most rewatchable movie of the year. That has an awful lot to do with the performance anchoring it. At the beginning of the film, the camera catches her in the audience at a high-profile murder trial. Kellyanne is there to be a witness, but why? Is she connected to the case? Is she there to see that justice is going to be done, or does she have ulterior motives? The answers to these questions are not to be found in her sphinx-like gaze, which stares down the camera and the audience with what you can only call Kubrickian intensity. Over the course of Red Rooms, we watch Kellyanne watching. She is always watching. And Gariepi's ability to suggest different measures of curiosity, cruelty, and again, possible psychosis in every close-up borders on the extraordinary. Often she seems to suggest these things at the same time. Once the movie starts to put its cards on the table, I use this metaphor very deliberately because once again, A+ online poker player, and when that happens and the darker side of Kellyanne's voyeurism emerges, Gariepi transforms fully and frighteningly into the very portrait of horror. There are shots in this movie that other critics and myself have described as nightmare fuel. They almost all have to do with this actress's ability to hold the screen in close-up and give us images that we're not going to forget, even when we're not sure that the character knows what she's doing, which I think is an amazing accomplishment. Following his comeback performance last year in Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer, where he held his own amidst a bevy of A-listers, Josh Hartnett anchored M. Night Shyamalan's surreal comic thriller Trap with a menacingly witty presence reminiscent of Hitchcockian anti-heroes. I thought about Joseph Cotten in Shadow of a Doubt, and definitely Anthony Perkins in Psycho. We're definitely supposed to think about the latter. That's very deliberate. The most sympathetic thing about Hartnett's Cooper Adams is that he is willing to stick things out with his preteen daughter at an endless stadium pop concert. The least sympathetic thing about him is that he is a serial killer who is carrying on quietly and ruthlessly behind his family's back. Every time he goes to check his phone, which is a moment of terrible recognition for any middle-aged dads watching the movie, he is really checking on a video feed to his victims. Not only does Hartnett manage to reconcile two extremes, we'll call them the girl dad and the butcher, but he shows how they inform each other. Hartnett makes Cooper's stress about saving face in front of his little girl palpable, while also letting him be cold-blooded and manipulative and threatening in the way he interacts with total strangers in the shadows and in the bowels of the stadium. Helps that Hartnett is convincingly threatening. The sequence near the end where his character goes shirtless, for reasons that I will not spoil here, reverses and even weaponizes a collective perception of what dad bod looks like once and for all. For all the actors who have sometimes struggled to navigate Shyamalan's stylized dialogue, and there are some good actors whom it has defeated, Hartnett is immediately on his director's eccentric wavelength, and he surfs that wavelength with some real skill and some real balance. His affably upbeat line reading suggests just a wolf who's trying to keep comfortable in sheep's clothing, which to me is exactly what Trap is about. The best movie villains are usually the ones who feel like they have a genuine axe to grind. Chris Hemsworth's Dementus in Furiosa is a bad guy who will tell you that he's gotten a bad rap. He is a former family man, clearly racked with grief over the loss of his wife and daughter in whatever apocalyptic event has transformed the world into a wasteland. As usual with the Miller Mad Max movies, the less we are told, the more that we can imagine. We certainly have a nice, vivid symbol of this former life in the ragged teddy bear that Dementus travels with, which symbolizes the paternal persona that has hardened over time into violent rage and some other pretty unflattering tendencies. Ostensibly, in trying to adopt Anya Taylor-Joy's orphaned Furiosa, he's doing a nice thing, but the empathy is undermined by the fact that he is the one who killed Furiosa's mother in the first place. She was a sacrifice on the altar of strategically marauding warlord who's trying to consolidate power and authority, making an omelet, breaking eggs, etc., in a role that simultaneously draws on and spoofs the superheroic charisma he has as Thor. Hemsworth convincingly juxtaposes pettiness and megalomania. Dementus is very funny. He is spiteful, he's vindictive, he's impatient, he's occasionally incompetent, especially in his dealings with the movie's other bad guys, and yet you feel for him more and more towards the end, no matter what he's done, especially when he starts begging Furiosa to deal him a death worthy of his epic ambitions. Dementus's comeuppance, we might say, is to literally get his flowers, as Furiosa uses his broken body as fertilizer to help try to seed a brave new world. It's a perfect coda for one of the year's most fertile bits of movie star acting. Let's keep Hemsworth away from the Marvel Universe and give him parts where you can see how good he can be. Reuniting with the English director Mike Leigh 3 decades after their shared peak of Secrets and Lies, for which she received an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress, Marion Jean-Baptiste sinks her teeth into a bitterly juicy role in Hard Truths, and she's been racking up critics group nominations and awards in the process. Her character, Pansy, is a woman whose paranoid fear of the outside world has begun to infiltrate her own domestic space. As she rails to her husband and son about the unkindness of strangers, she's increasingly alienated them as well, to the point that their house, as tidy and organized as it is, has begun to feel like a kind of antiseptic chamber of horrors. Baptiste is an amazingly resourceful actress. She works very smartly inside Leigh's improv-based structure. She plays Pansy as a kind of anti-life force. She's the sort of person who would rather torch a room than light it up. The question hanging over Hard Truth is why she feels this way. And depending on how you look at the movie, it's one that it seeks to answer, but only partially. Rather than trying to reduce Pansy to a type, Leigh and Baptiste permit the character the dignity of her own misanthropy, even and especially when it's clear that the most scathing putdowns are aimed to boomerang back right between her own eyes. Sometimes performances like this can seem like an actor humping a single sad note over and over. Marion Jean-Baptiste orchestrates an entire melancholy sonata and Hard Truths of angst and anger. This character is very hard to take, and she's not easy to forget. It's one thing for an A-list actress to love taking risks, but if you want to work without a net, you also have to be able to stick the landing. This is something that Nicole Kidman has done over and over and over again. Her role in Baby Girl nods to certain past Daredevil performances. I thought of her early run in the 2000s as the willing plaything of all these Svengali-ish auteurs who liked putting her through the ringer, seeing how far they could make her bend before she broke. You think about Kidman in Eyes Wide Shut, or Dogville, where she went head-to-head against Lars von Trier, or even a movie like Jonathan Glazer's Birth. Baby Girl nods to those movies, but it is also very much its own thing, a study in subjugation as liberation that refuses to stay inside anything like a comfort zone. Kidman's character, Romy, is a tech world innovator who takes pleasure in taking charge. She is what might be referred to a bit cringily as a girl boss, but she also likes being bossed around by an underling who has her number in both senses of the word. And he's also not afraid to dial said number during office hours or off the clock. That'd be the character played by Harris Dickinson, who seems to have an uncanny understanding of how to get this strong older woman to do whatever he wants, which in the end is really also what she wants. The elements of Baby Girl are familiar, but the excitement of seeing Kidman walk her particular tightrope between objection and self-actualization is thrilling. This is a performance that never loses its footing or its nerve. Kidman's Best Actress prize at the Venice Film Festival is another statuette for Crowded Mantelpiece, but it's still well earned. She is 40 years, or nearly 40 years into her career, and she retains the ability to grab us by the throat and take us by surprise. Motor-mouthed annoyance isn't just in Kieran Culkin's wheelhouse, it's what the foundations of that wheelhouse are built on. From Scott Pilgrim vs. the World to Succession, he's perfected a particular type of fast-twitch charisma, sometimes risks metastasizing into self-parody. In A Real Pain, he leads into that with impressive results. Culkin's character Benji is a fast-talking charmer who actually isn't all that charming. On a long enough timeline, his shtick wears thin, and as it turns out, 1 week on a Holocaust-themed tour of Poland is enough to drive the people around him, including his cousin David, played by the film's director, Jesse Eisenberg, to despair. In a way, what Culkin is doing is similar to Marianne Jean-Baptiste in Hard Truths. He has to find a way to draw us in and keep us at a distance simultaneously, and he does this by varying Benji's rhythms as smartly and effectively as a veteran bullpen ace. Every line of dialogue is a curveball or a cutter, sometimes sinkers that hit below the belt. Dialogue-driven dramas are an endangered species these days, at least in movies as opposed to on television, and A Real Pain is pretty modest in the end, modest and self-contained piece of work, but there's nothing minor or marginal about Culkin's accomplishment. Somehow, even though he stays very close to his other roles, he makes you forget them, and he vibrates on this anxious, fuzzy frequency that he has made his own. Adam Pearson doesn't arrive until just past the halfway mark of A Different Man, but the movie is nevertheless made in his image. The protagonist, Edward, is an actor trying to navigate New York's acting scene as he suffers at the same time from neurofibromatosis. Edward is played beneath ingeniously realistic makeup by Sebastian Stan, and he's a lonely, recessive figure in need of connection. After a twist of fate and a very sci-fi style experiment allows Edward to shed his skin, he becomes a more conventionally attractive leading man, and Edward experiences success on stage and in his private life. That is, until a doppelganger of his past self, with the very ominous, very assassination-coded name of Oswald, shows up to steal his role, his girlfriend, and his sense of self. This is where Adam Pearson comes in, even though the makeup Stan had worn in the first part of the movie is modeled on Pearson's own face. So as I said, he's sort of been there spiritually the whole time. Pearson had acted for writer-director Aaron Schimberg in Chained for Life, where the pair parodied issues of disability representation. A Different Man extends that project while giving Pearson a showcase as a gentle but almost malevolently friendly charmer. Oswald's cheerfulness contradicts Edward's internalized self-loathing, as well as his assumptions about facial difference. The scene where Edward shows up out of nowhere, serenades a hipster bar with an impromptu rendition of I Want to Get Next to You, which he slyly and unmistakably directs straight at Edward, is a disarming and sweetly ruthless showstopper, really funny, wonderful performance. There is always something exciting about watching a movie star come to life on his own in real time. Rebel Ridge is the showcase that Aaron Pierre's been waiting for. Jeremy Saulnier's film is about a man caught between righteous fury and a kind of bristling restraint. The suspense is generated out of whether this guy with a special set of skills, worthy of Liam Neeson, or, John Rambo, or Tom Laughlin as Billy Jack. You can cite whatever vigilante movie premise you want. He has these skills, but he's trying to do everything he can to keep from unleashing them. As an action hero, Aaron Pierre seems ready-made for combat. M. Night Shyamalan fans can attest that the guy is built like a mid-sized sedan. He's even more compelling when he's in motion. If this movie was only scenes of him as Terry Richmond just, bicycling down the highway, I think it would be a kind of star-making performance. But what he's also able to do is take this character and make it work as something other than just a symbol of resistance. And in this movie, it's a very racialized symbol of resistance. This movie deals with police brutality and asset seizure and other issues that give it a real kind of surface of realism. There's a wonderful scene where Terry is trying to run down on his bike a school bus that's transporting his cousin to prison. It's not just about exertion or suspense. It's not just a plot point. He makes it feel exhilarating. He makes it a small victory in a movie that I think is predicated on the idea of small victories. Now, the fraught backstory to Rebel Ridge and how it was made has been written about. There was another another actor who was supposed to play the lead role. Pierre getting the part, I think, is an example of providence. It's sort of impossible to imagine Rebel Ridge without him. It's exciting to think what other sorts of action roles he might take a swing at in the future. You don't want to say his performance transcends a Netflix thriller because the movie itself is a kind of transcendent Netflix thriller. Pierre is sort of the engine that powers it and puts it over the top. Speaking of over the top, everything in Megalopolis is over the top, and then about 8 miles high above it is Aubrey Plaza. She has always been a fearless comic actress on television, sometimes in very underrated films like Dirty Grandpa, which is a masterpiece. She is able to sublimate her vanity while remaining sexy. This is a hallmark of movie stardom, that she can sort of be completely ridiculous and completely magnetic at the same time. I think the gender politics of Megalopolis skew towards the toxic. This is a movie filled with gold-digging stereotypes and temptresses and manipulation and false accusations. This is what sort of gets balanced against its more philosophical bent. But she rises above those stereotypes, not by condescending to them, but by inhabiting them. This is a gleeful, joyful, very campy performance. When I say that her scenes reminded me of Showgirls, I mean it as a compliment. She's draped in a series of flamboyantly tailored costumes, and she just slithers through this movie. She is winking at the camera. A friend of mine said she was like a serpent and Eve wrapped up in the same package. I thought she was like Janet Snakehole, let loose to rampage through a $100 million passion project instead of an episode of Parks and Rec. Every time she's on screen, this movie sparks to life, and when she's gone, I think she takes that spark. We're sad whenever she's not on screen, but at least she has an exit for the ages. There's the saying that dying is easy and comedy is hard. Pulling off a genuinely hilarious death scene, though, is Legends only stuff. In truth, you could just as easily say this is Léa Seydoux and George Mackay in The Beast. Bertrand Bonello's film is about two characters who remain lovers across the ages through different incarnations of themselves, past, present, and future, 19th, 20th, and 21st century. Nevertheless, as good as George Mackay is, and he's equally good, Léa Seydoux is asked to do a little more. She's the face of this movie. She is the beautiful, expressive, perpetually beguiled face of this movie. She has a ton of close-ups. The opening scene, which has one of her characters being an actress, she's asked to pantomime terror in an empty room against a green screen, and it becomes not just with the character acting, but about Léa Seydoux acting, and also about the theme of the source material, the Henry James novella The Beast in the Jungle, which is about the idea of fear, an unseen, ephemeral, creeping fear, and how this changes how we live our lives. It's a really abstract idea to embody, and she pulls it off. Bonello wears his Lynchian influences on his sleeve. The highest compliment I can give Seydoux in this movie is that she conjures memories for me of Naomi Watts' multifaceted tour de force in Mulholland Drive. That's high praise. She's an actress who works with uncompromising and difficult directors. She takes on uncompromising and difficult roles. Her performance in The Beast, I think, is for the ages. That's our list. Don't know if you liked all the people who were on it. Don't know if you think that there were some people who were missing. Don't know if people are heartbroken that, Timothée Chalamet as Bob Dylan isn't quite there. Let us know in the comments. Let us know who's missing, what you think of the movies that are there. I hope that you like what you see. Hope that you like what you watch, and see you next time. Adam Nayman signing off.